Sometimes the person you're meant to be with has been right in front of you all along. The camera pans across a cozy restaurant as a nervous man straightens his tie, waiting for his blind date to arrive. If you've ever believed in fate or second chances, this story might just restore your faith in love. Hit that like button and subscribe to see more real-life love stories that will warm your heart and remind you that sometimes, the universe has plans we never could have imagined. James Reynolds clutched the stem of his water glass, checking his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. The restaurant buzzed with Friday night energy, couples laughing, friends celebrating, servers weaving between tables with practiced grace. He felt painfully out of place. "Daddy, is your date pretty?" His 7-year-old daughter Olivia had asked that morning as he dropped her off at his sister's house. The question had made him pause. How could he explain to a child that beauty wasn't what he was looking for anymore? After losing his wife to cancer 3 years ago, what he needed was someone who understood that his daughter would always come first, someone patient enough to accept that his heart was still healing. "I don't know, sweetheart. I haven't met her yet," he'd answered honestly. Now, sitting alone at a table for two, James wondered if he'd made a mistake agreeing to this blind date. His boss, Victoria Chambers, CEO of Horizon Publishing, had been insistent. "You need to get back out there, James. Trust me on this one." Victoria had always been kind to him, especially after Claire died. She'd given him flexible hours so he could be there for Olivia, allowed him to work remotely when needed, and never questioned when he had to leave suddenly for school emergencies. But this felt like crossing a line. Still, he respected her too much to decline. The restaurant door opened, and James's heart skipped. A woman entered, scanning the room. Not his date, too young. He exhaled, relieved and disappointed simultaneously. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria, "Running late. Order a glass of wine. Breathe." James smiled despite himself. Victoria knew him well, perhaps too well after 4 years as her editorial director. He ordered a Cabernet and tried to relax. 20 minutes later, just as he was considering calling it a night, the door opened again. This time, Victoria herself walked in, looking different than she did at work. Her usual tailored suits replaced by a simple blue dress, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in her signature bun. She looked younger, softer somehow. Their eyes met, and Victoria's confident stride faltered. She approached his table slowly. "James," she said, her voice lacking its usual authority. "Victoria? Is everything okay? Did something happen with my date?" Victoria took a deep breath and slid into the chair across from him. "I'm your date, James." The silence between them stretched as James processed her words. "I don't understand." "I couldn't find the courage to ask you directly," Victoria admitted, her fingers nervously tracing the edge of the menu. "It seemed inappropriate, given our professional relationship. But then I couldn't find the courage to follow through with the ruse either." James studied the woman across from him, the woman he'd worked alongside for years, the woman who'd supported him through the darkest period of his life, the woman he'd never allowed himself to see as anything other than his boss. "Why now?" he asked quietly. Victoria's eyes met his, vulnerability replacing her usual confidence. "Because life is short, James. I've watched you rebuild your world for Olivia. I've seen your strength, your dedication, your heart. And somewhere along the way, I realized I wanted to be part of that world, not just as your boss." James thought about all the times Victoria had asked about Olivia, had remembered her birthday with the perfect book, had extended deadlines when his daughter was sick. He thought about how she'd never pushed him to date, until now. "I should go," Victoria said, misreading his silence. "This was unprofessional and unfair to you. We can pretend this never happened on Monday." As she stood to leave, James reached for her hand. "Stay. Please." That night changed everything. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, moving from books they'd edited together to dreams they'd never shared with anyone. Victoria told him about growing up in a small town, determined to prove herself in the publishing world. James shared stories about Claire that he hadn't been able to tell anyone, about how terrified he was of failing Olivia. She asks about her mother constantly, James confessed over dessert. I show her pictures, tell her stories, but sometimes I worry it's not enough. Victoria's hand found his across the table. You're keeping Claire's memory alive for her. That's everything, James. 2 weeks later, Victoria met Olivia. James had been nervous, Olivia was protective and had rejected the idea of anyone replacing her mother. But Victoria didn't try to be a mother figure. Instead, she brought a set of watercolors and asked Olivia to teach her how to paint, claiming she'd never learned properly. You're really bad at this, Olivia had giggled as Victoria deliberately made a mess of her painting. I know. I need a good teacher. Do you know anyone who could help me? By the end of the afternoon, Olivia was calling Victoria, Tori, and asking when she could come back. Their relationship wasn't without challenges. Office gossip spread quickly, with some suggesting James was sleeping his way to the top. Victoria faced questions about her judgment from the board of directors. They decided to keep their relationship professional at work, which sometimes meant Victoria had to be harder on James than others to avoid any appearance of favoritism. The most difficult moment came 6 months in, when James found Olivia crying in her room, clutching a photo of her mother. Do you love Tori more than Mommy now? She asked, her small voice breaking his heart. James sat beside her, pulling her close. I will always love your mommy, Liv. Always. She gave me you, and you're the best thing in my life. Loving Tori doesn't change that. Hearts don't work that way, they grow to make room for more love, they don't replace one love with another. Olivia considered this. Like how I loved Mr. Whiskers, and then when he died, we got Pepper, and I love her too, but I still love Mr. Whiskers. Exactly like that, James said, amazed by his daughter's wisdom. Tori told me it's okay to miss Mommy, Olivia confided. She said she wishes she could have known her. James felt something heal inside him. Victoria understood what Claire would always mean to them. A year after their first date, James took Victoria back to the same restaurant. Olivia was in on the plan, had even helped pick out the ring, a simple emerald that reminded them both of Victoria's eyes. Remember when you said life is short? James asked, taking her hand across the table. Victoria nodded, her eyes already glistening with understanding. You taught me that it's also too precious to waste being afraid, he continued. You never tried to replace what I lost. Instead, you helped me find something new, something different but equally beautiful. He slid from his chair, kneeling beside her. Victoria Chambers, Olivia and I were wondering if you'd consider becoming a permanent part of our family. Victoria's tears fell freely now. Are you sure? Both of you? Olivia said, and I quote, Daddy, if you don't marry Tori, I'm going to be very disappointed in your decision-making skills. Victoria laughed through her tears. Well, we can't disappoint Olivia. Is that a yes? It's a yes, James. It has been since the moment you asked me to stay. They married in a small ceremony in Victoria's hometown. Olivia served as both flower girl and best daughter, as she insisted on being called. During the reception, Victoria's father pulled James aside. My daughter has always been fearless in business but cautious in love, he said. Thank you for showing her it's worth the risk. Victoria stepped down as CEO 6 months later, not because she had to, but because she wanted to start her own boutique publishing house focusing on children's literature. I want to build something that matters to all of us, she explained. Their first book was a collaboration, a story about a little girl whose mother becomes a star in the sky, watching over her always. Olivia provided the illustrations. Life settled into a new normal. They moved into a house with a garden where Olivia could play and Victoria could plant the flowers she'd always wanted. James continued at Horizon under a new CEO, eventually becoming editor-in-chief. They had their struggles. Blending lives is never seamless, but they faced them together. On their 3rd anniversary, Victoria presented James with a memory book she'd been creating with Olivia, full of photos of Claire alongside new family memories they'd made together. "So we never forget where we came from," Victoria said, "and so we always remember how lucky we are for where we've ended up." James often thought about how close he'd come to canceling that blind date, how easily he might have missed this second chance at happiness. Sometimes the most important person in your life is already there, waiting for you to see them clearly. If there's one thing I've learned from sharing these stories with you all, it's that love rarely arrives in the package we expect. My own journey mirrors James and Victoria's in ways I never anticipated. After losing someone I thought was my forever, I found healing in the most unexpected place, with someone who had been in my life all along, watching me stumble, waiting patiently for me to be ready. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding someone new, but about seeing someone familiar with new eyes. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe for more real-life love stories that remind us all that second chances are possible, that healing comes in its own time, and that sometimes, the love we're looking for has been right in front of us all along.